Good morning all together. Enable Now Knowledge Transfer Session, SCORM and Learning Management System Integration as requested for the sake of GDPR. As always, if you don't want your name, your face, your questions, your voice, or whatever being visible to others, please disconnect now since this meeting is being recorded. Good, guys. We talk in SCORM today. As always, just open the lines and ask whenever you want. There's an official Q&A at the end. But let's have a look to the agenda. This is what I prepared for you. We're gonna do a theoretical SCORM walkthrough just to get an idea about this alien called SCORM, just to get a theoretical idea of where it comes from and what it actually does and what it is for and blah, blah, blah. And then we're gonna circle back to Enable Now and check what Enable Now does in the context of SCORM. And there, since it's all about structures, we're gonna intensely talk about the structuring best practices and about all the funny abbreviations in this context. Yeah, if you talk about SCORM, is a very academic thing sometimes, so they are trying to make things more complicated to just appear wise, but basically it's not a big deal if you get all this sorted into a real concept. Then we talk about tracking. This is what it's actually about, but we need to set the foundation if we talk about the structures, and then I will show you some testing best practices and testing environments that I'm usually using for that purpose, the SCORM Cloud, the reload editor, all this stuff that you should have in your toolkit. And then we quickly, this will not eat more than 5 minutes, talk about the SAP LMS specific interfaces that Enable Now actually provides, which are yeah, that will be a quick one, and then we will have, let's say, at least 30 to 45 minutes left for your questions. So if you all agree, let's get started. SCORM, the SCORM standard. So what is SCORM? The Shareable Content Object Reference Model. That already sounds academic, and this is actually where it came from. So there was the anchor store of SCORM, more or less the anchor store of SCORM, called AICC, and that was once invented by the aviation industry learning committee. I don't actually know the abbreviation by heart. However, that was the first tracking standard and structuring standard for online learning, and that was invented by the US American aviation industry. And the direct anchor star of AICC is the SCORM standard, and the first officially massively used one is SCORM 1.2. So the big picture around SCORM and learning management system standards is basically the understanding of how all this plays together. Hello, Ellie. Basically, we talk about the SCORM standard as such, and the SCORM standard brings together content providers and learning management system providers. So what about the SCORM standard? The SCORM standard exists in several versions, even more than I painted here. As I just told you, Aviation Industry Courseware Committee, I believe this is what the abbreviation was for, was the first one, very simple, put parameter and URL-based standard. It's basically not used anymore in most of the cases, and still is supported by Enable Now. Why? Because you could face customers using ancient learning management systems from the 80s. In that case, you will still have to use AICC, or if you have certain infrastructure related requirements that only can be solved using AICC. But let's get back to this later. Usually, and I haven't experienced any requirement regarding AICC since at least 2 or 3 years, you will not face any requirements around. But AICC is far easier to handle than SCORM, so if you understood SCORM, there shouldn't be an issue here. The control files are different, the wording and the naming is different, but however, it's basically the same approach. Okay, but we talk SCORM, and SCORM, there is that famous SCORM standard 1.2, invented 2000 or 2001, I don't know. We're going to see in a second. I have a slide for all the history stuff. And that's still the most common one. Yeah? That's the smallest common denominator for all of the target systems. For this stuff is always learning management systems, and all those learning management systems that you could pass by. The three ones that SAP has on the price list: SumTotal, Zaba, Cornerstone, IMC, Clicks, you name them. Yeah, so there are plenty, several hundreds of different solutions around on the market. And the standard brings the content that is provided by somebody into those systems, because SCORM is used to create standardized packages that are about to be transferred into learning management systems. So this is what we talk about. What is content? Content is either off-the-shelf content, a course you buy in the shelf from Open Sesame, from Skillsoft, economical standard courses, how to behave in critical situations, training, blah, blah, blah. Or, and this is our case, content coming from authoring solutions like ours, and being then imported into the learning management system for tracking and certification purposes. So we will not go into details regarding LMSs and their functionalities. However, this is the target system for any SCORM use case. Okay, questions here?
Can you say 2-3 words about Litmus?
Litmus is cool.
Yeah.
I love it. Litmus is a beautiful learning management system. It's not as massive as the top docs that we have on that slide in the corner. Yeah? That function-wise, SuccessFactors, SumTotal, Cornerstone, they have far more functionality. Yeah? They are far more powerful. But I love Litmus as a pure learning management system LMS, pure e-learning LMS. So there is no classroom parts, there is no hybrid curriculum-driven approaches, there is no material management and all the stuff that you need in a grown-up large enterprise learning management system. But from a user interaction perspective, I personally believe that Litmus is the best learning management system that we have on the price list right now, simply because it's easy, straightforward, and ultra sexy from the perspective of the end user. The self-understanding of Litmus, it's all cloud. The self-understanding of Litmus is basically being a learning management system for companies that deal with knowledge. Yeah? Services that need explanations, software vendors that have their own knowledge, whatever, academies or universities, and vendors of knowledge, no? like Verlage. I actually don't know how Verlag is called in English.
Publishing houses.
Publishing houses that are selling their goods, their IP in the form of a courseware. So it's facing the outside, while other commercial learning management systems, if you look at it from a company's perspective, rather focus to the inside. Yeah? And that's the differentiator. From a marketing perspective, where SuccessFactors Learning and Litmus do not cannibalize themselves, because one is pointing to the end user, to the consumer, which is Litmus, and SuccessFactors Learning rather would point to the inside. If you look into details, both could be used for both cases. Nevertheless, that's the marketing approach for both. And I personally, again, would see Litmus as the rising star, simply because I love the interface. Yeah, it's ultra simple, and at the end, when you are in the catalog looking at it from an end user perspective, you will realize that it's really sexy. Litmus SAP, Google it, first page. You will have a demo instance access within 20 minutes. Yeah, and it's worth having a look, simply because it's nice to play with. Right? It's just a beautiful piece of software, honestly. Goody. So, folks, AICC, SCORM 1.2, smallest common denominator. That's the key takeaway. Yeah, that's what we should focus for, even if some learning management systems ask for 2004 content. Still, 1.2, at least from my personal perspective, is easier to handle. We're going to see later why this is the case. And then we got the experience API called Tin Can. which is the direct ancestor of the SCORM 2004 4th edition standard, and that is not broadly used yet. Yeah, so usually learning management systems, except Cornerstone, would not eat tin can content yet, and at least not in the expected quality. Yeah, so but this is another story, because, and we're going to see that later in detail, because Enable Now is not supporting tin can yet. Internally, just for you to know, internally, if we are talking to our internal tracking functionality, the manager, this is already based on tin can. So internally, we are talking tin can to our own components, but we are not able to create experience API-based content, so-called CT packages, to the outside world. Yeah, not yet. Most likely this will happen sooner or later, but for now, we focus on SCORM 1.2 and SCORM 2004, 3rd and 4th edition if we export. Okay, so this is the big picture. What is the next one? This is the history overview I was talking about. 1.2, yeah, that was a good bet. It was 2001. The SCORM 1.2 standard was implemented, and yes, this is the widely used one. And this is the one that we support. Yeah, so this is the important column from our perspective. What are we actually supporting? Enable Now is supporting AICC as mentioned. Yeah, you can more or less ignore. You see, it's ancient. SCORM 1.2, still very famous and the smallest common denominator for the average learning management system and for the average tracking requirement. Requirement management and what you can achieve is our main topic. So if there's questions, let's wait another 20 minutes. Is supported SAFE 1.2. No one probably knows. It's quite special to the European, or maybe even focused on the German insurance industry. It's a special derivative of SCORM 1.2, which was created in 2007 from the I don't know if it was a European or a German committee. However, it's a derivative of SCORM with some specific LOM-based meta informations that are specific to learning contents for insurance companies. So that's basically the only thing that you have to know about SAFE 1.0. If you have a customer from the insurance industry, they might potentially ask you, do you support that? Then the answer is yes. But besides that, handling of SAFE 1.2 packages is absolutely equivalent to 1.2 SCORM packages. So basically, there is no difference. So this is all we're going to talk about this. We're going to see it in the drop down later, but we'll not go into details here. And then SCORM 2004, 3rd and 4th edition. There is 3 years in between. Nevertheless, it's just minor changes here, which is the most up-to-date SCORM version, and we support both of them, the 3rd and the 4th edition, up to the one which was released in 2009. And then we have the pre-versions of tin can, which was common cartridge and LTI, which was basically rather used in the academic world and is not really in-depth used. And then the experience API, which is actually only an API, but not a metadata and a declaration language, but rather an API that holds or brings learning measures together in a very powerful way, but not widely used yet and not yet supported, except, as mentioned earlier, for any case where we're talking to our own internal engine, where we have a tin can store that actually tracks all the interactions with the learnings in very detail. So the detail level of tin can is very high, but again, we are not supporting it yet. So that's it. And there is one restriction in the sub-sentence here regarding SCORM 2004, which is the fact that we are not supporting sequencing and navigation for SCORM 2004 yet. Keep that in the back of your mind, even if it doesn't say a thing to you. We just keep that in the back of our minds because this is important to know and very important to communicate. That we are actually supporting the mandatory portion of SCORM, but not the optional one, which is sequencing and navigation. Again, in 20 minutes, we will know what this is about. Okay, so that's our SCORM overview, and that's the important column. This is what we actually do and what we can do, and the restriction around the sequencing and navigation. So back to SCORM as a standard. It's always standard. SCORM is a standard, but you have to talk SCORM because it's a standard. So from my personal point of view, SCORM is the most unstandardized standard ever. There are so many dialects around that you really have to understand the principle of it and then adjust it to the current dialect that you are talking about, because all the learning management systems, they require certain specifics, because SCORM is a dialectual standard, let's say. So there are ultra, it's ultra flexible. Parts of the communication between the systems are not standardized enough to really call it a proper standard. There is a lot of variation around. But however, how is the SCORM standard built? What does it contain? The SCORM standard, the shareable content object reference model, as a standard, is held by an organization called ADL, Advanced Distributed Learning, which is a government agency in the US. And they are the owners of the SCORM standard, and they are publishing any paper around learning standardization, and they are actually holding all the XML definitions and everything that is related to that standard. That's owned by ADL. We're going to see their website in a second. So this shareable content object reference model is built by some books. All the industrial standards are usually organized in books. Book 1 of the SCORM standard, specification, is the overview. That gives you an overview about all the others below, and what the intention, the overall intention is. This is worth reading. So this is not a lot. This is like 20 pages, but nevertheless, it's worth to have a look. As soon as we go down to the detail books, which is book 2 to 4, no one would expect you to really know this by heart, literally. And nevertheless, having a closer look into it, if you are interested in the topic, does make total sense. Book 2 is the CAM, the content aggregation model. This is the standard part that defines how a content provider has to model the content and how to create descriptive files that tell the taking over system, the learning management system that takes ownership of the content as soon as you import, an idea about the intention of the authors, the structure of the course, and how things play together. This is where we're going to focus on now in the first run, because this is the most important to understand. If you understood that, the rest is just self-explaining, more or less. Yeah, but this is what we have to really go in details, because this is the most questions that we got on the field. I exported it to SCORM, but it doesn't lead to success in the LMS. And then you have a look at the package that they exported, and they just put the cursor on the root of their tree, right-click, export to SCORM, and upload the complete tree to LMS, and then asking themselves why it doesn't work. Yeah, so it's the basic understanding of what the CAM says and what content aggregation means, and how all this plays together is the secret weapon, basically. Yeah? This is what you have to understand. And then if we understood the structure properly, we're going to talk about the book 3, which is the runtime environment, RTE. And this discusses and defines how the JavaScript-based API, then things become a bit more technical, this JavaScript-based API that is instantiated by the LMS besides the content in the browser of the user is talking to the content to find out what the content actually does, and writes this data back to the learning management system. So first we talk structure, then we talk API, RTE. And the 4th book, this is why I put a separator in here, was added with SCORM 2004 first edition, which is SN, sequencing and navigation, which gives us potentially the option to first detach navigation, look and feel, and navigation logic from the course. You know that Enable Now, for instance, uses a certain framework called the trainer to provide navigation functionalities, forward, backward search, sitemap, audio functionality, and actually holding content together sequentially. This is the major thing. And with SCORM 2004, potentially this could be centralized, only you load it once and then just reused for that purpose. Could potentially, that's what I'm saying, because as I mentioned, we didn't support that yet. And sequencing, this is the holy grail of fancy training. That means I can create, let's call them paths because that's the easiest, paths through learnings that are created out of single objects. Let's say we have 10 objects, and there's a path for the beginners that goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and a path for advanced users, which is 1, 2, and then 7, 8, 9, 10. And you skip the others. And this is what sequencing would do. You can create trees which are specific to certain target audiences. And you can create so-called objectives between those different items and say if, let's say, a test was, or a question was answered right, you will have access to this. But if it was answered wrong, you go the other way and you have to repeat the item or something. Very powerful. Nevertheless, you stop discussion early because we are not yet supporting this. I will show you later how to add sequencing to Enable Now curriculum manually. This is still possible. There is editors for that purpose, which is third party, but then things become a bit fancy. So let's just take that as a side story for now. Our story, if we are around in the field and discuss SCORM, you should know the overview. Just to have an idea what you're talking about and know of all the fancy academic abbreviations used in this context. And you need to in-depth understand CAM, and you need to at least understand roughly what the RTE does to be able to configure the Enable Now export and API settings properly to receive the results that you want to receive. So,
question about the sequencing and navigation.
Yes.
Does that basically mean that there are more SCORM objects and we don't create more SCORM objects? Or is it more related to having metadata, like more properties?
More properties.
More properties.
No, and not really more properties. It's organizations. We talk about. This is exactly the slide that we need now. A SCORM content aggregation in our world is a curriculum that has a certain structure, and the structure is built into an XML file, and this XML file is called EMS manifest XML. That's the smallest common denominator for all SCORM exports. At least this file needs to be there, otherwise it's not SCORM. And within this, we will find a node called organization, and for all the SCORM standards that are not working with sequencing, it's one organization, and that organization is sequential in most of the cases because that's the easiest to understand, like 1, 2, 3, 4, or in my example here on the screen, 1, 2, 2.1, 2.2. So like an inheritation where you can create kind of chapters that intend each other. If we would use sequencing, we would have a loose collection of single items, and we would create organizations per whatever, target audience, per target group, per event, per trigger. If this happens, you go another way. That's exactly the idea. And this needs to be tailored. That needs to be created somewhere. And we, Enable Now, do not have a corresponding editor. What we are doing is we are moving the idea of sequencing back to us and saying, yes, we are a tool working with multimodality and with references very intensely. So we are actually more SCORM than any LMS because we are preaching reusability and redundancy prevention. This is what all SCORM's ideas are about. But if we talk about sequencing, what we would do is we would create a target group specific course and just export it because we have no redundancies. We use the same stuff and create the path for the beginners and export it as the beginners course and import it into the learning management system as the beginners course. And on the same day, we could create the second course that is for the advanced users and export the advanced course to the LMS. So what we do is we say, okay, we don't need sequencing there and do not support it because we can sequence on our own. And from an argumentation perspective, this is what you would answer. Yeah, but besides that, it's something between metadata and structure. Yes. But we're going to see later where in the manifest this is actually represented and how it would look like if it would be properly supported.
Okay.
All right, so CAM, content aggregation model. What's this? The CAM describes the content structure and the relation between the single objects. The elements we have to understand here in this context is the so-called SCO, coming from SCORM, the shareable content object. From a definition perspective, this is where you should have a closer look to the definitions on the Wikipedia entry of SCORM or on the IDL page. This is a nice definition that I don't know by heart. It actually says something like the smallest standalone consumable knowledge object that makes sense from the perspective of the consumer. No, like a paragraph of text that without context above and underneath would make no sense is not a valid SCORM SEO. But if it tells a story from our perspective, let's say one book page that standalone without one before and one after would create knowledge on the other side when you consume it, would be an SEO, shareable content object. But from an intellectual perspective, let's say, and the most important attribute of an SEO is it must make sense. Yeah, it's not as granular as a paragraph of text or a single image. Yeah, that standalone would just look nice, but would tell no story around knowledge creation. That's what they call assets. So we have SEOs, makes sense. In our case, mostly, let's say, a chapter or a page, and assets. And the structure then in the XML is built out of so-called organizations. The organization is a node in our XML that starts that structuring table of content. It's an intended table of content, so you will be able to read it immediately if we have a look later. And this is organized by items. And those items point to resources, and the resources might be assets and SEOs. And all this is used to give the LMS an idea about the files, the physical files, which are necessary to run the course properly, because the LMSs usually are organizing their internal repositories, file repositories on their own. A SCORM package that is uploaded to such a learning management system is packed into a zip file. And what the learning management system does is it takes this XML file out of the package, parses it, analyzes it, and then takes the single files that are mentioned there in this catalog out of the package one by one and stores it in its own repository. And maybe it even changes the paths because it has another storing principle. Yeah, that's what SCORM, what level of freedom SCORM gives the LMS vendor to say how we are orchestrating our structures and file repositories. That's up on us. We need that XML file that gives us all the information about what portions of files are used by that course, and then it's up on us what we are doing with it. This is how to read this. Okay, so that's the major, the basic understanding. And from a data perspective, this is how it looks like. It's the so-called EMS manifest XML that must be on the root of each of those SCORM packages. And this EMS manifest file contains optionally meta information. The meta information language is called LOM, Learning Object Metadata, LOM, which we do not fill anyhow, except the description and the title, the caption of a course. We don't provide any additional LOM data. What we answer usually is you can fill the LOM data in the LMS after importing the package. We could actually add the LOM data to the package already. Again, later I will show you a modification editor for such manifest files called the reload editor. And with this one, you can create the complete LOM metadata set subsequent to the export, but usually that gives no benefit. That's usually something that you can easily do afterwards in the learning management system itself, like learning time, target audience, all the meta information that you would expect. Then the organizations, that was the slide before, and then the resources. This is most important from our perspective because the resources contain the single, we talked about it, SCOs and assets, the media and the audios and the videos and the pictures and everything that you use in the course, plus the pointers to the files that the player is using, the trainer, the Enable Now trainer is using to play back the single course. And this is the orchestration of all this, how it's bound together from a course perspective, and what you have to make people understand is the organization, most important. And then we have a stack of physical files. And this together, this manifest file plus the physical files that this manifest file refers to, is called a content package. And this is usually, not usually, this is in any case, a zip file. And this zip file is created by the Enable Now SCORM export functionality and is then uploaded to the learning management system. And this happens in any case. This also happens if we have the native interfaces to LSO, Learning Solution, or SuccessFactors in play. Yeah, they give some advantages because they feel like a direct interface, but what they basically do is they just skip that one manual step where you take that zip file and upload it to the learning management system because it's somehow interfaced. But in fact, the same happens. A zip file is created, a zip file is uploaded. And for SuccessFactors learning, you need to take care because there are certain use cases where you shouldn't use the direct interface because it doesn't work, especially when we talk about SCORM 2004. But let's postpone this to the Q&A session later. But important, no? So keep in back of your mind, there are some scenarios where your tracking would totally fail if you would use the direct interface, but if you would use the manual upload and the upload tool provided by SuccessFactors Learning, it afterwards works, and that's related to the sequencing requirements again, but I will show you the subnote that explains that into detail later anyway. So understand structure, chapter, page, chapter, page. Yeah, that would be this example. That's the most important to understand from our perspective as knowledge management consultants. And physically, it looks like this. And then let's summarize. Yeah? Let's summarize this from the perspective of an upload. Let's pretend that we got 3 of those famous SCO thingies that should sequentially build a course. Chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, each maybe 5 pages or 3 pages. That fits better to my painting here. So those content pages, those shareable content objects are assembled into one content package, and the content package, based on the XML files explained before, contain, let's call it, the delivery instructions of that package. That's the instruction how to deliver the content package containing those 3 shareable content objects to the end user. And that's all part of that package. That's the EMS manifest file that provides those delivery instructions, and the physical files as such are the package as such. The learning management system delivers those SCOs based on the instructions provided. No EMS manifest file, no instructions, no SCORM package. No SCORM package, no delivery. So that's what the LMS does. And the LMS actually delivers them based on the delivery instructions provided to the learner PC, and everything else, the complete magic, is taking place in the browser of the learner. And the SCO per SCO, that's the aggregation level. The aggregation level is SCO, so each SCO independently from the others, but always in the context of a course. And the LMS are consequently communicating while the SCO is delivered. And how this communication is working, this is defined in the RTE, in the runtime environment. That's book 3 of SCORM. So wrapping up, book 2 talks about structures, gives you an idea about your curriculum is looking like. And now we are forwarding it to book 3. And book 3 is the runtime environment, and that is actually the standardization of how the single SCO within a curriculum, again, my 3 SCOs here in the stack, containing several files, either runtime related files like the trainer files or media assets, like images and texts, how this is talking to the learning management system. And that's what it's actually working. So after upload, the LMS server, I'm a learner, I assign to a specific course, I assign it to myself or have it assigned by my manager. Then I'm opening the browser and starting to consume this content. So the first thing that happens is that the LMS launches the content package. The content package knows that it's containing 3 SCOs. So one SCO, one shareable content object after the other, is then rendered in the browser of the client. And it contains the famous ECMA script. I have no clue what this abbreviation is about, but you might face this abbreviation, so I posted it here. It's a part of our trainer, and then the LMS provides an API instance, which is also JavaScript, that's coming from the learning management system, and it's usually attached to the window the content is displayed in. And those guys are talking to each other permanently. The ECMA script is part of the content. It says, hey, I'm at the SCO1, and now the learner pressed the forward button. And now I'm left, and now it's SCO2 in charge. And this information is forwarded to this API instance in the browser, and the communication between the browser, the content package, and the LMS is basically this dotted line, which is not defined in the SCORM standard. So how the LMS is communicating with this API is something which is related to, let's say, the flavor of the learning management system vendor. And that's basically the root cause why there is so many flavors, because this dotted line is not standardized. It is in Tin Can, which is a pure communication standard. But as I mentioned earlier, we have to ignore Tin Can for now. And this client-server communication actually comes with some JavaScript methods. There are more, far more than the ones that I stated here, but these clearly show what the life cycle of an SCO within the browser is and what data is transferred to the learning management system. So the first thing that happens is the content is calling the initialize function. It says, I'm ready, I'm loaded, yeah, and now the learner started to consume me. That's initialized. What happens on the LMS is, yeah, the time is then measured. The learning time for that particular SCO is measured starting with initialize, and some other initialization values, for instance, the learner name and some scoring thresholds that you need to fulfill if you talk about a quiz, for instance, are passed back to the content. Pass back and send, that's those two, get value and set value, nothing uncommon. Get value means SEO says, LMS, give me that value, and set value means SEO says, okay, the learner did something with me. Answer the question right, answer a question wrong, press the next button, stuff like that. Commit is flush, commit. It triggers a data transfer between content and LMS. That's quite important to understand that this is in either commit after each action or one commit at a certain moment in time. And this has a heavy impact on network traffic on the one hand, and on the other, some learning management systems prefer one commit per session. Others are indifferent and they don't care whether you commit once or 50 times. That's something where we have to take a closer look to later. And then if it's done, terminate. So the time between initialize and terminate will be the learning time for that particular SEO. And after terminate, the last stack of data is sent back to the LMS. The SEO is closed. And then if we stay in the picture here of that stack, the second LMS, the second SEO would be launched with initialize again. So that's basically how that works. So that's pretty much straightforward. This is not special. Before we proceed, questions?
Yes.
Yes.
The client-server communication with the initialize and the get and the set value, is that something that we can manipulate in, for example, the tracking settings?
That's exactly what we modify there. That's what they
Okay.
are for.
Okay, so it's not the LMS system that defines this kind of communication, only how they interpret it.
No,
It's
partly, yeah. Let's take that famous example that you will face in any case, is scoring. There is a set value method where the raw score and the actual score are set to the LMS. This is what you define as an author in the course. You say, my assessment has 10 questions. They are all equally weighted. So they all have 1 point, let's say. So answering one question right creates 10% of my score. Because actually everything is then again cumulated to a percentage in most of the cases. No?
Mm-hmm.
And then this is the point in time where you have to have a closer look to the LMS specification or talk to an LMS a consultant, because some, and this is not defined in SCORM, some learning management systems expect this score being a percentage value from the perspective of JavaScript, which would be a value between 0 and 1. And the percentage would be 2 digits behind the comma. So 98% pass score would be 0.98. And other learning management systems expect full digit values, because they say 100% is the number 100. And if it's 98%, it would be the number 98. So the data that is sent would be 2 digits. And otherwise it would be 3 digits with a comma in between. And worst case scenario, the LMS is not flexible enough to digest the one or the other. So if you configure it wrong, you will never it will never lead to a proper result. Yeah, that's a good example. So it's not about modifying the methods as such, but what they are sending and how. This is the important part that has to be aligned with the LMS standard to be able to really interact with the target LMS 100% properly.
So the functions are there, the communication happens, but the values that are transmitted is what we define in our tracking sessions.
What we transmit and how we transmit and what we transmit. In parts what we transmit and mainly how we transmit. In what frequency, based on what event, etc. Yeah, exactly.
Can we also manipulate what happens between the API and the ECMA script? No.
Yeah, but basically yes, because that's where the actual action takes place. This here is a black box for us. The dotted line communication is a black box for us. We don't care. This is not our piece of cake. The API is coming from the LMS. The LMS is the LMS, and how those guys are communicating to each other doesn't matter to us. What we are doing is defining what ECMAScript tells the API. How the API is getting this data back to the LMS is not our piece of cake.
Okay.
This is why this is solid and this is dotted.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but this is details, and from the outside perspective, you won't even realize that there is 2 levels. You would consider this as 1. Yeah, that's just a technical view here, but from an outside perspective, it's just the content talking to the LMS. That there are 3 instances in between, that doesn't matter to understand. That doesn't make a difference regarding the understanding.
Okay, another question, please, Mike.
Yes.
You gave us an example that the LMS gives the information on the threshold when a course is passed,
yes.
For example, for a quiz. But we can also set that value inside Enable Now content. Who wins or who gives this information to whom?
The EMS manifest gives the information to the LMS, and if you want to modify it later on, you can modify it in the LMS. But the initial value is coming as a meta information from the course.
But that would mean we have to set the content to pass the results and not just the complete.
Yes, but this is something that we're gonna go into details now.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the proper understanding of progress and results. Yeah,
okay.
that's the major takeaway for today.
Okay.
This is where we're going to now. Anyway.
Okay.
Okay. So this is the theoretical part, and now let's move forward and have a look at how we actually interpret this theoretical framework in our little world. Enable now content. So let's see. Initial checklist. What is the first thing you do when you try to get something properly working in a learning management system? The first thing you check is that tracking is activated in general. Why is this? Yeah, because tracking general on Trainer Global, this is the magic switch we talk about. Here we go, tools, settings, Trainer Global, tracking general is tracking backend. Per default, set to none. Why is this? Because we cannot foresee whether the customer has an agreement with their workers' council or with whomever, with HR, to be actually allowed to store personal data. We had that in several sessions. And this is same for SCORM. So SCORM is one of the languages our backend tracking engine speaks. And if this is set to none, you can create the most beautiful SCORM packages ever. They will never talk to the learning management system because this little switch is still none. And this is, since ever, and will most likely be forever, one of the top 10 issues that we have in support regarding tickets. Honestly, still. Yeah, and understandable that the support guys somehow get aggressive when they answer that like 5 times a day. Yeah, so the first thing you check, yeah, please, is that is tracking activated in general. Yeah, and out of the box it is not. And any export based on tracking back and globally set to none, switched off, would lead to the fact that the RTE part of all this would not work. This would not happen. Yeah? This communication would still simply not take place. Nevertheless, this would still be there. That means the LMS would be able to digest the package because the content is well formed and described by the manifest file. But since tracking is inactive, this portion would not exist, which then would lead to the fact that simply nothing would happen and no one would know why. This is why this is number one, first thing to check. The second thing to check for most of the learning management, yes, sir.
Sorry. When we are in use cases to export in LMS, but also to use the library, and we want to track both the usage in the library and the usage in the LMS. Which settings do we select in the tracking in general? Automatic or SCORM automatic?
Automatic works in any case, but automatic has one big disadvantage, which is for authors, because then even your previews will track, because everything will track, and your previews in automatic will track on cookie level. And this is just annoying for the authors, because if you once reached page 5, let's say, and you preview your course again, you will start at page 5 again, but as an author, you want to start at page 1 each time, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so this is the big disadvantage of automatic. And what I would do personally is create specific configurations for each use case and use configuration per configuration. Let's postpone this because I prepared configurations for you exactly because of that expected question, and keep the question in the back of your mind, Hervé, and if it's not answered at the end of the session, we can come back to it in the Q&A, but I believe it will be answered. Okay.
Mike, can I also ask a quick question that's related to that, and it might be a stupid question? Do I need cookies in order to have each end user being able to resume at the point where he left off?
No.
No.
In SCORM, not in SCORM. It's stored as a CMI.
No, I mean in the library.
Yes.
Yes. Then cookies need to be activated.
Yeah. That's all. It's all in a cookie. Yes.
Okay.
This is why there is a specific option, right? You could
Exactly.
do everything based on cookie. And
But
this
if I
cookie
have
store,
but if I have that, my authors are also annoyed. That's the
yeah,
annoyance
that's what
that
I'm
you mean.
saying. Yeah,
Okay.
that's the annoyance that everything is checked, even the preview. Yeah, this
Okay.
is why I'm usually providing corresponding configurations. One for the authors, let's say, where we switch it off. Yeah, one for the SCORM export, where we have SCORM automatic,
Yeah.
and one for the library live, which is manager. Yeah, then we can be very distinct per use case. The only thing that you have to pre-configure once properly is which use case uses which configuration. Yeah, but that's
Okay.
the most robust version. Yeah? Automatic sounds like, hey, automatic is automatic. Yeah? But as you said, yeah, the annoying thing is that counts for the authors while producing as well. This is why automatic is probably not the best choice.
Yeah.
But we talk configurations later anyway.
But you were just saying something about the cookie store. I interrupted you.
Yeah, and the cookie store was modified because of the same site issue with the 80 browser family. Yeah, so Edge 80 and Chrome 80 had the same site requirement for the cookies, and this was now changed in the hotfix. So since the hotfix is in place, the content stores cookies properly without any security-related hiccups, even in the Chrome 80. That was that big deal with Chrome, where Google had put that requirement on top, that the same site requirement must be held. Yeah, and this is now since 1911 hotfix, but not before. So if you have content in place that should cookie track, which is older than 1911, you have to republish it to make it run in Chrome properly. Otherwise, no cookies will be interpreted at all.
Okay.
Goody. So we're gonna stay like this. This is the. Should I stay here where I am? Global. Okay, take this to automatic here. And then going back to the slides. All right. So first of all, tracking activated. We discussed why. Most important, still top ticket count in support. So please avoid opening tickets because of that. Next one, deactivate any full screen playback for that purpose. Why is that? Because a full screen browser, or one step back, setting a browser window into full screen is something that is done via JavaScript. That means the browser itself triggers a JavaScript function, toggle me into full screen, and then it toggles itself into full screen in the best case. But in most of the cases, the security restrictions forbid that. There is one security principle that says, okay, a window itself should not be able to modify its own appearance with JavaScript, because all those drive-by hacks where they claim that your computer was locked by a virus and you should call the funny Polish Microsoft hotline and give them $400. Yeah, that's all happening like this. So this is why this is prevented somehow. To have to not really be able to toggle an existing window into full screen per default. If there are trust relations between the source and the client, yes, for sure, that can be configured like this, but in a common case, regularly, this would not work. So what happens, the browser, and this is the fallback in our framework, the browser says, oh, no, you are not allowed to put yourself into full screen. So what happens is the trainer framework says, okay, then I'm opening a new window, because for new windows pop-ups, and the decision is free because that's executed while the window is initialized, which breaks the SCORM communication. Why is that? Going back to here, because this needs to be the same window. And if the SEO is established in a window, that then creates a new window because it was originally intended to run in full screen, the API still hangs around in the old window and waits without getting any input. Yeah, and that would simply lead to the fact that learners will learn like devils, but no data will get back to the learning management system in any case. Yeah, and that is a simple standard approach. You never ever have any full screen playback when anything is working in the learning management system, because that always leads to hiccups. I know one that can really digest that properly, which is Cornerstone. Cornerstone doesn't care. I don't know how they did it, how they managed it to make the API instance follow the content in a cascade of windows. I have no idea. That must be magic somehow. However, it works. Yeah, but that's the only one I know where this doesn't really matter. For all the others, no full screen. And unfortunately, still our factory default for demo modes, for instance, still foresees full screen playback. Yeah, so this needs to be decided before. And one other pro argument towards SCORM specific configurations to be used. Then a third one, which is not relevant anymore since I'm not saying it's not relevant, sorry. Don't get me wrong. I put it into that list for reasons, but it's not that massively disturbing anymore. Nevertheless, for hygienic reasons and to really understand what you are doing, I would still do it. Remove any unused items from the course structure. So don't just dump stuff into the course that you don't probably use or you consider as optional or whatever. That always leads to problems. What I just want to say is keep your structure clean. This is where number 4 points to as well. It's all about the structure, and just for you to take into consideration, what I'm usually doing when I have customers trying to focus on learning management system based creation is that I leave structural templates in their toolboxes and say, okay, if this is their didactical scenario, this is a best practice structure for that purpose. If this is your scenario, this is the best practice structure. That's the easiest to make people understand what they have to do. So the first two are very, very technically very important. If you don't do that, it won't work. And the number 3 and 4 is just best practice. Get rid of the unused items and try to really intensely discuss structures with the authoring teams, because this is the part that they have to understand. The removal of unused items before 1908, where this was completely refactored, so the complete SCORM export engine was rewritten, reprogrammed. Before that took place, this was absolutely mandatory, because any portion of the course that is part of the node that was published became an SCO. Yeah, it became an SCO, so it was part of the curriculum. So to reach a 100% threshold, you would have to consume it somehow, even if there was no link to it. Yeah, so the SCORM export didn't actually interpret the ability of the user to actually access the particular SCO. It didn't matter. If it was in the structure, it was part of it, even if there was no way to get there. And that was one of the big reasons why we had a lot of tickets up and running regarding SCORM and doesn't work and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that was just badly tailored structures, but beautiful structures versus not so nice structures will be our topic now anyway. Yeah, so, but this is just a checklist. You might want to use this for your workshops. 2 mandatory ones and 2 highly recommended ones. Goodie.
Sorry,
so,
Mike, that
yes.
was 1908 or 1808 where it was rebuilt?
I believe it was 1908 or 1905, but it was last year.
Okay, would be
Check
interesting for
What's
Lanxess. Never mind. Okay.
Check the What's News. I don't know.
All right, thanks.
All right, so enough theory. Let's go into details. What I built for you, and I will upload them to our consulting repository as well, is some SCORM examples, which are ultra simple courses. That's the simplest course you could imagine. First of all, yes, because that's the next question that will come anyway, the default container for a SCORM course is a book. You could potentially upload other structures like libraries just made out of groups to learning management systems as well. Absolutely. You could even create a bunch of text units and upload them to the learning management system. They would still be considered as being valid SCORM packages. Nevertheless, they would, at least from my personal perspective, not make any sense there. Yeah, a learning management system is not a library. A learning management system is something where you have formal learning approaches and measures going on, where the manager says to his folks, guys, you have to learn this until tomorrow. And then people go there and assign to the course and go through the course and learn their stuff and make their assessment, get their exam, and the exams data is written back to the learning management system. That's the original case. That's the use case. Any explorative informal scenario should not be there, because that's not the intention of a learning management system, right? So, and this is the general starting point. A proper SCORM package is a course, and a course is a book, nothing else. And the simplest thinkable book, and this is the one that I would always recommend if you start to debug why things are not really properly working, when you are around with a customer LMS that you never had in touch, and things doesn't work, you use this course. And this course has 2 pages, and the one page contains a 1, and the second page contains a 2. And there is nothing else in it. And if you once saw page 1, your progress would be 50%. And if you once saw page 2, your progress will be 100%. And there is no assessment in it, no questions, so there will be no score. But just to get generally things up and running from a configuration perspective, that's the easiest to use. Sometimes you start the debugging with an already created course that has maybe 50 megabytes. Yeah, and then you have to, and then probably you know that story. The customer wants you to debug stuff with the course that they created, and you upload 50 megabytes. You go through 50 pages one by one. You stop at page 25 to try to simulate something that is 50% progress. That just eats time like hell. So take this as your toolbox for debugging, and that's the easiest thinkable course. 2 pages, 50%, 100%, no score. So let's have a look. Just to save time, I actually exported all my dummy courses that I want for presentation purposes already in several formats. Right now, we're going to have a look at one specific one, but I would suggest, because it's 11 o'clock now and I need coffee, that we do a quick break, 5 minutes, fresh coffee, and meet again, let's say 10 past 11. Is that okay?
Yep.
So I actually exported already a lot of different variations in different formats and with and without debugger. But for now, let's do it again together, just to see how it works. As mentioned, the course A, the most simple course ever with just 2 pages. How to create a SCORM package. I publish the selected object, checked whether the SCORM API is active because general tracking was activated beforehand. The structure is ultra clean because it's only those 2 pages. So I published the selected object to SCORM using, potentially you could use filters. I'm using a configuration here. I'm not using the debug configuration. I'm using my default configuration now. I pack the resources. I'm usually doing that when I'm exporting SCORM courses, just to reduce the amount of queries or HTTP requests against the learning management system, because if you pack the resources, the complete resources that are used by the course are packed into one big file. And coming from there, so it's one request only. It takes longer to initialize, but then after that one request, the player is fully initialized. Probably makes sense, but this is something you need to test. And now I'm just setting back to the easiest understandable SCORM format, which is SCORM 1.2, and I'm setting this one to book display, show only books. This is one. No, that's not one. That's the most important switch or parameter for SCORM exports, and basically it's just has a misleading caption, let's say. It's called book display. It should be named aggregation depth, for instance. That would tell the better story. However, they call it book display. And I just want to give you an idea about aggregation and SCO management. How show only books, okay? And then at that level, I'm choosing a certain target folder. I'm using my desktop and call it course A only books. As a zip file to my desktop with the default configuration and packed resources. And this is now opening it. And if I'm opening the folder, we will have access to it. Course A only books, extract, snip, snip. And now we go in here. And see, that's the common structure of our content exports in any case, whether it's a library or a course, it doesn't matter. All those XSDs, this XML definitions, they are used to validate the EMS manifest file and other descriptive files. Some learning management systems expect those XSD files to be in, some do not. Others don't care. Most of them actually don't care. This is why we got, I'm just opening the dialog in, publish selected object, why we have those switches here, where we have the XML schema, the XSD files being part of the package, and the schema locations, which is one mapping file that points to the ADL servers where the schema can be downloaded from. For most of the up-to-date learning management systems, it doesn't make a difference anymore. But you know, those files that we were just looking at, those and those from here to here, and those, they are only created if those guys are set to true. If we would switch them off, the structure on the root of the package would be less complex. But there is no additional value or something or functionality. It's just, are they in place or not?
Would you always set the two switches together or not at all?
To be honest, this one creates the files, and this one creates the locations to the files in the manifest. And in a regular manifest, it points to the online source of the XSDs to validate. Usually that validation is done by the LMS anyway. And if you don't do that, it's pointing to the ones that are included. Now, like this, it's pointing to the ones that are included. And like this, they are there, but are not used because the links to validate in the XML file are still pointing to the ADL servers. Yeah, and there's one thing, if your learning management system is not allowed to talk to the internet, then there might be hiccups if they are not part, and this is why you are there. Honestly speaking, hey, if it's not working, switch them on. If it's working afterwards, you know that you should switch them on. Yeah, but there's not that much theory around this. It's just about those bloody XSD files. Okay. And the manifest file and the validation, this is what I'm talking about. Whoever is starting the call, please mute yourself. Just muting all of you. Here we go. So this is where we talk about, right? So this is the EMS project. EMS is the root, and if it's set the other way around, that this is not in there, and then if validation should take place at the moment in time where it's imported in the LMS and the LMS cannot talk to that server, then it leads to errors, blah blah blah. Yeah, but this is too much details. However, where I wanted to go to is here. Organization has a caption, which is a LOM meta information. How is that course called? And it contains items. In my case, it contains exactly one item called course A. And that's where the organization ends. That's the simplest thinkable SCORM object ever. And that's what we call a so-called single SCO course. The course as such, course A, exposes itself to the learning management system as the one and only SCO. And after that, we start with the resource listing. And the resource listing, it's our nodes that we know, the resources, and then all the files are listed that belong to that particular resource, including the foreseen storage structure, the folders that the learning management system shall create at the moment in time where this package is imported. So what it actually says is I'm describing, I am a meta description of these folders and all their files in between. Adaptable, book flat is the style that I'm using, book flat. And then we got 3 files in there. Yes, we got 3 files in there. And the next resource would be categories, and then we got plenty of files in there, and so on and so forth. So if we quickly go back to the deck and look at this. This is what I'm just showing you. Optional metadata section. Our most important part is the organization, and then comes the listing of the resources. That actually is the map of the physical files being part of the structure. Map. Oops. Structure. Where's my folder gone? I closed it accidentally. Okay, you got the story. However, this is what I want to point your attention to. Organization, title, one item, the course. That gives us one very important information. A book as the designated container for a SCORM course can act as a so-called master tracker for all objects that are underneath without the necessity of exposing those objects as single SCOs, shareable content objects, to the LMS. Let's leave this open and export the same course again. So I'm doing the same again. Again, my course A, basically only containing 2 pages. Same standard, same packaging, SCORM 1.2 still, but now I'm moving this from show only books to books and all sub-objects. So down to the bottom, display all. Okay, same thing, a different folder, course A, all. So it doesn't take that long. I'm opening the SCORM package and I'm opening the EMS manifest file in the same editor. And we compare. 1, 2. Organization becomes deeper. Now, a single slide from the perspective of the LMS is considered as being one SCO. So what advantages would that have? Anybody, any idea?
Does that mean interruption is easier? I get more information about the progress? No.
The progress is still a percentage value that could be 50 or 100 in both cases. The actual visiting state per SCO is something that is tracked, because now the page 1 from the perspective of an LMS, of the LMS, has its own organizational identifier ID. And this is the aggregation level again. This is why they call it content aggregation. My aggregation level now goes down to the very tiniest thinkable object. And that means the LMS administrator would be able to create a report on the time that Mr. Miller spent on page 1 of course A, or the average time that people are actually spending on page 1 of course A, or page 2 of course A. So all the reportings, all the trackings are then related to that identifier ID. In comparison, here, the LMS only knows, yes, I'm course, called course A. And whatever happens in there is just consolidated and accumulated into one set of data, which is a score and a progress, etc. But the LMS has no bloody idea that this course only contains 2 pages. It doesn't care. Okay, so that's the big difference.
Does that mean we can see where people interrupted exactly on what page?
If in this case you see that in the you potentially see that in the tracking of the LMS, here you still know it because the last visited bookmark, we're going to see in a second where this is stored, is something that is standard-wise written back, and we keep track on our last visited pages. So we still know that it was page 2 that we left the course, so we come back to that page when we come back the next time. But it's a functionality of Enable Now. It's not a functionality of the LMS. In that case, potentially a functionality of the LMS could be used for that purpose. In fact, an approach like this simply creates a lot of data additionally to that approach. And that approach, again, I'm talking about experience and my personal opinion here. That's not school book knowledge about SCORM. I'm saying if I have a course A, which is a sequential course, in my very simple example, 2-page, let's say it's a 20-page course. And the only thing that I want to track is, did the guy watch all the pages? And that's the only thing I want to know. Would I dare to create that data per page? That would overwhelm the administrator and the reporting engine. There would simply be too much data. No one would need it. No one would care. It's too much data. And so here we have the advantage that course A, the book object in Enable Now, acts as a master tracker. So it knows, hey, I know I'm the book. I know that I only got 2 pages. So all the data that come from those pages, I am consolidating into data that I forward to the LMS, and I'm exposing myself as the knowledgeable container object with this particular idea. In 99.9% of the cases, from my personal experience, this approach is the best approach because it's easy to understand, it's easy to handle, and there is less configuration necessity on the LMH level than in any of those more complex scenarios. And those would be drawn out of the pocket only if you are asked for, because we need more data. We need more aggregation. We need a more granular and more sliced aggregation on LMS level, because that data is for what reason ever necessary. Yeah, but again, in most of the cases, the customer will consider the course as the object they want to track. Yeah, not the single pages or the single assets or the single links or whatever within the course. The course as such would be the one. So that's the big difference. One thing, even the very simple one here, is already coming in 2 flavors that make a massive difference on the LMS side. And the little tiny switch that is responsible for that is this one. No, this one. Yeah. And this one says only books and direct sub-objects. In my example, this would have led to the same. Yeah? But for instance, in the next example, we're going to use this one. You want to cut something on level 2, but you don't want to ignore level 3. This is what this would be for, and this goes down to the bottom. And this one, ignore books, very seldomly used. For instance, would be used if, we talked about this earlier, if you still would export a library as a SCORM package for what reason ever, and you don't want to track at all. And the library would be the SCO, then you need to use ignore books if the library would contain books as well. Otherwise, the books would still become single SCOs, and the tracking would just lead to completely meaningless data. That's the only scenario where you would use ignore books. So that's the default for reasons, for the mentioned reason that makes the most sense from a data perspective and from a handling perspective, because it's the easiest to handle. And any further down, you will have a so-called multi-SCO course. So that's the single SCO setting, and those 2 are multi-SCOs, and that's basically the one that you use if you have books inside something else and you want to ignore them. Yeah, but that's very seldom. All right, so let's stay like this and go back to our deck, because that's actually what we just talked about. I just put it back in slides to have something for you for training and workshop purposes. As always, at least since a while, I will put those those slides that we see today in one chapter of the strategy and configuration phase master deck. There's that one deck on the repository that you hopefully all know, where all the collections of everything is in, which is not meant as a one workshop one. This is your book of wisdom, and I will put those into this deck as well.
Hey.
So yes.
If you have a structure with books inside books,
yeah,
for the book display setting, show only books, how does it work?
The show only books is actually wrong. That show only books in that case means show only the book, which is the root. Yeah, so it's not only misleading, it's also partly wrong. But I may just wait another 5 minutes because the next example will exactly be there.
Okay.
All right, so but single score course is the recommended one. As soon as we have multi-score, you see what actually happens. This is the example that I was just showing you. And then we have show books and direct sub-objects, or all. In that case, it makes no difference. Where we have SEOs per page, where the aggregation level of the SCORM package is down to the very bottom. That means the finest aggregation level per page would be possible. On the LMS side, I could create designated reports for the visit time and period of page 1, but do I want that? In most of the cases not. So this is definitely best practice, and this parameter here, which is the most important in this context, would have been called better aggregation depth. From my perspective, this is how I'm training that for customers saying, okay, they called it book display because they wanted to make it more easy to understand, basically. That's misleading. So we call that thing aggregation depth, and then it makes more sense. Good. Another thing, since we are here, that happened with the last release, where we redone the SCORM export functionality and this persistency, is this one, persistent organization IDs. This should always be kept to true. What does that mean? That means that the export, if you export something starting with the course A node in your tree to SCORM, keeps the organization identifiers here persistent. It stores them, and next time you create the course, they will be the same. That was never the case before, which led to really big hiccups. Why? And because the learning management system uses the identifier IDs to, obviously, because they're called identifiers, to re-identify the content. And in case you upload an update of an existing course, if those identifiers are different, the upload mechanism of the learning management system will recognize that course as a new course, even if it is the same course, because it has the same title. But titles, as always in our world, are only properties. So it's all about the technical identifiers. And this one, keep the organizational IDs persistent, means, now finally, the learning management system is able to understand that if I'm uploading something, that upload is an update of a course that is already existing automatically. Before, that was manual handwork of the administrator, and that is the backside of the coin. And this is why this escalated a lot of times, is if you don't do that, if you don't realize that that is the case, it creates a new course, you create a new learning measure based on the new course, and all the tracking data before is not associated with the new one. So you have two different course objects. And in some LMSs, you probably don't even realize that. That's the bad part of it. So, however, this is why I made this being part of the screenshot. Always leave it on. Never switch it off. Okay? Because of that reason. That makes the whole thing robust and update capable. If that's not the case, no updates. Not without any manual interference or intervention of the learning management administrator. And if you keep this active, this is not necessary. Good. Any questions so far? Course A. No. Good. So let's go course B. That was Hervé's example. Course B. Course B, book, So one book is the container, one book is the chapter. Now let's just create this one fully blown. Right click, publish selected object, SCORM, default configuration, SCORM 1.2, book and all sub-objects, persistent IDs. That all down to my desktop, and OK. Swoop, open folder, no, open SCORM package, and then check this EMS manifest. Transfer question, what do you expect? How will the manifest look like? How many levels?
Just one.
No, I used all sub-objects.
6. All of them. 3 levels.
3 levels. And how many SCOs?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yep, right. So now we are down to the very highest aggregation level, which means that the organization that we create is actually the sitemap of the complete course down to the page. Aggregation level is the page. That means each page has its own organizational unique ID, which is kept persistent by the export. So it's update capable. And potentially the learning management system administrator or report viewer user would be able to measure how long the average user would have been stayed on page 1. And if you don't need that data, you don't need that depth. So if you only want to talk about the course B and leave the course B's structure in the hands of the author, and the learning management system should only gather data about how long have you actually spent in that course and what was your score and how is your progress. This would be the better choice. Publish selected object, same course, yeah, higher complexity, SCORM 1.2, but not that one, but that one. To my desktop, comparison, same structure, manifest, dang. Just as course A, simplest single SEO course. Yeah, and this aggregation level, again, in 90% of all cases, would absolutely be sufficient to gather the data on LMS level that you are expecting to gather, which is usually a score and a progress. You can play with this on your own. The key takeaway from that part of the session is you should be able to interpret the single parts of the EMS manifest files to be able to project what will happen when you import this to the LMS beforehand. Yeah, that's the part that you really have to get, that you really have to understand. Well, one in between those two, no, we're not going to do that, but just to give you an idea, one level in between would be object and direct sub-objects, and this would have been looked like this. No pages, but the chapters would be SCOs. Yeah? That could potentially be something that your customer is asking you for. Yeah? That course is massive. It had 5,000 pages and it takes 2 days, and it's made out of 10 chapters. I want to track chapter-wise. I want to know how much time they spend per chapter. All right, no problem. Export. But this level, course, publish. Only show books, not down to the bottom, but books and direct sub-object. This is actually why this is existing. And this will create 2 levels per definition. Level 1 and everything which is underneath the level 1. And this is just wrong. It's not saying only show books. It says only show the first book. So you play around with those 3. You also play around with this one, but you know that this only counts for objects or for object types which are not sequential, which are not books. For instance, a library that also contains books, but the books should not be SCOs. In that case, that would be the one to use. But usually we go, okay, single scope course, 90%, and then the other 2 whenever you are asked for. But this makes life the easiest.
If the books were groups, there were no...
Make no difference.
Makes no difference, okay.
The only difference when you are chaptering courses, why you would use a book is the fact that you can adapt the book reader's settings here on chapter level. And
navigation-wise and stuff.
Yes, and you can then just decide that in chapter 1 there should not be any sequential forward-backward navigation by hiding the complete panel, for what reason ever, and define a different homepage per chapter. This is what you would do here. And if you don't need that, you could also use group objects as chapters. It makes absolutely no difference, neither from a SCORM perspective nor from a player perspective.
So the aggregation would be the same if it's
Yes.
a book or a group?
Yes.
Cool.
Goody. Back to where we came from. I need to clean up my mess a bit. So, and now we come to a fancy one.
Mike, I have a
Yes.
quick question. What you're saying about the settings, the book settings, I found that not to be working yesterday. Is this new that it should work? Should it have been working in 1905?
It should, yes.
It wouldn't work if I run through the book sequentially and use the books as a sub item. Only if I open a sub book as a link, so it opens in a new layer, then it would work.
Okay. So
I'll double check.
You did not test it. You haven't tested it in a learning management system.
No, that's true.
Okay.
I ran it in the normal preview.
Okay, then you misunderstood me. Sorry.
Okay.
It's not about that working in our world. If you would use this in Manager, it would never work. If you use this, if you would try this in a local preview, it would never work. This is a distinct feature for learning management system, and then the prerequisite is that you export them on at least level 2 aggregation, because then the launch. Remember this slide.
Yes, now I got it.
The launch is independent. The launch is per SCO. That means the launch is per SCO. If the SCO level is then your chapter book, the initialization script of the player will be run per chapter. Okay, and that's only for LMSs. Maybe I forget that fact. That's the most important in this context. Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
And that even works when I forward with the forward button through the course.
Yes.
Once it changes the book, it will change the settings.
Yes,
okay.
Because then the forward button on the last page of an SCO triggers the exit command. The exit command makes the LMS launch the next SCO.
Okay, you just saved my life.
That's an implicit functionality, but it's a functionality of the learning management system. This is nothing that we can simulate outside. It's one thing that we only can simulate if we have access to a learning management system, which brings me to the next chapter.
One more question.
Yes,
to
please.
The book settings. Scenario would be I have 80% of a course that I want people to learn and 20% are nice to have.
Mm-hmm.
I know you could also just hide the book pages and create your own.
No, this is where we're going to now.
Okay. This
is exactly Course C. Yeah, Course C is a simulation of a proper curriculum. Yeah, grown-up curriculum. Kept still as simple as possible and lightweight for testing purposes. Yeah, and this is I will upload those 3 as examples, and I believe you will be fine with those 3. In any case, yeah. However, Course C is the one that we are looking for. It has chapters as well. The chapters have 2 pages as well. Chapter 1, Chapter 2. Then it has another one called certification, where launch certification. We have a button, start the quiz, which is the test. And this button actually goes into here, where I have a hidden folder called projects, where I have my assessment stored here. You see that there is a content reference. That means I'm linked from here. Yeah, I could resolve that quickly from here. You see where it's actually coming from. And then I have an optional simulation, and this is your scenario, Caroline. No? Simulation 1, the demo of whatever process is described here in chapter 1 is accessible by a link, but should be optional. Yeah, we will not track this. So how are we going to get this done? That's exactly what this slide is about. And this is the one that or a similar one, I'm usually using in those SCORM workshops. Swap presenter. Yeah. There we go. Yeah. So the ask, when you start creating a course early in the storyboarding phase, in the best case is, and the authoring team should ask themselves. So ask yourself, what do I want to track? What is the achievement of that course? What is the data that I want to gather when people are learning this? What is the detail level downwards that I want to have in this context? So a real life example, it is exactly what I just explained. There is a course about the SAP Launchpad, and it's a navigation course, so very basic. The backbone of the course is a book, as always, as it should be. The didactical red line is a book, and you potentially jump out to IT simulations and others, but basically a course is a book. And it has chapters and pages, all right. And at the end of each chapter, the author provides link lists pointing to demos. And those demos, they are explaining the actual handling in detail. The slides, the book pages, they explain it on high level, yeah, but the DAO users, they need it visualized. So there are the demos, but these can be considered as optional. Don't want to track them. And the course as such ends with 10 multiple choice questions, and the quiz shall be the trigger for the completion. And the score as percentage shall be written back to the LMS, but we should ignore the simulations. So which of the entities being part of that course needs to be configured how? Probably. But easy.
Try?
Yeah, let's give it a try.
So of course, overall settings, global will be result and progress, because we have
Exactly.
a test and we have book pages that we just want to track progress. Now, I would set simulation demo mode to tracking progress and result tracking none. And there's another story to that. And the test mode, which I use for the quizzes, would be result and progress. And the book reader setting could just be progress.
One mistake, but close to 100% A+. The book in our easiest example for that course is the master tracker for the whole course. And because my granularity level will not go down to the chapter, neither to the page. So I don't care about this level. So my aggregation will still be the book. If the book is the master tracker and the book contains a quiz, the quiz comes with a result, not with a progress only. How could the master tracker post the result to the LMS if it can't take the result because it's not tracking it?
So the global setting is ignored.
Exactly. That's one. That's number 2 on the list. Yeah, that's number 2 on the list. I configured everything right, but I still get no score. Hey, the book is the master tracker. If we have the aggregation level down to that book, and if you have anything which is assessing people, like questions, like a quiz, your master tracker, which is the top book, needs to be able to digest this data. And if you reduce its tracking capabilities to progress only or any other exotic one, and the result will simply be ignored. But that's it. Yeah, that's it. Understand the structure, define how deep you want to go. In 90% of the cases, it will be the easiest for you to just go to that single level and then define how the rest is working. That's the whole story. So course C is my example. Per default on and should not be deactivated is track the completion of the book. yes, this book shall be tracked in general. This once was added to the menu for reasons. Yeah, if SCORM is in place, it must be active, period. Except you have a book that only contains optional stuff. That would be your optional scenario for let's call them sub-books, the optional book besides the course. In that case, you would deactivate that. But
That
usually,
could be chapter further readings.
exactly, further readings
Okay.
or stuff. Yeah, you would have it outside somewhere, and you would switch it off, and then it wouldn't forward anything. Yeah, and that's the reason. The reason is, and now we just come to the reason why this is existing. It's existing because we have the project overrides for the projects. So the quiz can be handled differently because it has an override. All sims can be handled differently because they have an override in the settings, but the book has not. And that's the reason. Yeah, and if you want to configure one book within one curriculum different than another one, you have to do it here. Otherwise, it won't work. That's the original reason. Okay. But just to not confuse you too much, this is the two guys that we talk about. So first of all, we're going to export that as a book only, level 1 aggregation. That should be the master tracker. So we don't care about the chapters. We just leave them untouched. But we know that from a progress measuring perspective, that would lead to 25%. Watching that is 50. Watching that is 75, and watching that is 100. No, sorry, we have 5 pages. 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. And on the last page where our link to the quiz is offered and the close button that closes the course, we jump to something which is behind a hidden object. So it's not an SCO in any case, even if we would export a course like that down to the bottom level. Everything that is behind the hidden part of my structure would not be considered as an SCO, but I have a master tracker, which is my course object. So the quizzes test mode creates a score. The simple fact that there is an access to something that creates a score makes the master tracker expect this value from that quiz. And the only mistake that could be made here would be to switch this because of exactly the reason you proposed this, Caro. Set this to progress only. Yeah, because you think
book pages are anyhow progress only.
Exactly. The pages as such are progress only. The only reason why we got result in here is the potential case, and in most of the cases, that's the fact, right? You have a pre-test and you have a post-test in a proper curriculum. So you have 2 quizzes in there. And that's the reason. Yeah? That guy needs to be able to digest the data coming from that guy. And if you switch it off, it won't be possible. And the quiz as such, and now we come to the overrides again, for those of you not knowing what I'm talking about. If you are within an object of the type project, in a simulation or in a quiz, and you go to the corresponding playback settings, the single modes have so-called project overrides. That means specifically for that learning object and independent from my factory defaults, I can override what the administrator configured, and I can configure this one completely independent from the others. This is what project override does. And the one that we were actually touching is the project override for the test mode. Yeah? And there, for instance, you could go here and say this is result only. Yeah? There is not even a result only. So sorry about that. I thought there was one. Result stays on result in progress. So this is possible. And if you want, for instance, not just a hypothetical scenario, your customer says, I want that quiz in there. I want the feedback. Perfect. Yeah, I want the feedback page from Enable Now. I like that. I want the guys to know whether they answered right or wrong. But from a Workers' Council framework contract perspective, because we are in Germany, yeah, we are not allowed to store this data in the other system. So the assessment's result, the testers quizzes result should only be a self-reflection trigger for the learner, probably understanding that, oh, okay, maybe I have to redo that course because I didn't get it yet because I failed totally. But this data should not be going somehow back to the LMS. In this particular scenario, I have two possibilities to achieve that. Either this, in the project override of the test mode of the quiz, simply switch the tracking off, or just canceling that, and that closes the loop. Yeah? Saying this is a general approach. So in general, on book level, I would say in the general fallback settings for playback for the book reader, I would set the book reader's tracking generally not to result and progress, but to only progress, and then there will never be taken any results into consideration, even if they are sent. Okay?
Yeah, a question from the field.
Yes.
Simulation is optional, simulations like in your example, and the LMS system is SuccessFactors Learning. Then for some reason it did expect some results, so the tracking was, progress tracking was still 1 of 100, although it should be just 1 of 2, because the 98 simulations do not need to be looked at, except if you set the setting underneath the tracking to when this should be sent to never instead of. If you go back to tool settings.
Yeah, I mean, good, that's a hack. If you say send never, then it's never sent, sure.
Did you ever see that happening? That
No.
you put something?
Most likely, yeah, but this is just a guess, and we need to have a heads up for this, and we can analyze that together. I always have to have that in hands, otherwise I will not be able to answer, because there's so many variations.
Yeah.
But however, most likely what you did was exporting down to level 2 or below, and did not use a single score course only. And in that case, whatever you are configuring regarding the tracking, there is no master tracker anymore, because the single SEOs are tracking for themselves. That means the aggregation upwards on course level is done by the LMS. And if the single simulation object is an SEO, it doesn't matter what you configure, because it's an SEO. And it has its own data. Yeah, and most likely the issue is not here in your scenario. Most likely the issue was here.
For the export.
Yeah, and here you most likely used either that one or that one and not that one. That one, this is the reason why I'm saying in 90% of the cases, yeah, you would do yourself a favor just working with the most simple structure, because this master tracking is ultra handy, because then everything downwards works always in the same way. And if you go like this, even if you switch stuff off, still the single sibling, the single parent object, the single child object of the level 0 book, no, the primary container, would be a shareable content object. Then the LMS would expect something to happen with it. And if then you switch the tracking off for that, the LMS knows, hey, this is an SEO, but the SEO doesn't talk to me. That's bizarre. Yeah, but in any case, you will never reach 100% of anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the beauty of the master tracker. So as long as no one cries for other data, I would always go that way, which makes life far easier.
Yeah, because in general, with modern LMS systems, I never had to modify any of the additional tracking settings.
Usually,
we had that a lot with the LSO, but with the modern ones, usually you don't need to.
Good. Yeah. Again, heads up. We're gonna use your example, and if there is anything for the group, we can post it into the consultants jam. If there's any finding. Goodie. So guys,
Mike?
Yes.
Is there a quick question? Is there a way to have, for example, I want a quiz. I don't want to track the result really, but I want to track it only completed if it was passed based on our percentage. Is that possible?
Yes, that's progress as result.
Progress.
We come to this later anyway in the summary, but again, that's important. No? There's one little difference. Oh, wait, there's one little difference, which makes a lot of difference. Result and progress would be the default, yeah, and that works in most of the cases. So your scenario is progress as result. You want to have a pass status of the course, but just based on the fact that you've seen all the pages.
No, actually, I want the other way around. Even if I have answered all the questions in a quiz, I only want to have it completed if I reached the pass threshold.
Yeah, that would be the case if you have, oh, whoa, that's a good one. But yes, that's possible as well, but it's always you with those nasty ones.
I didn't get the question, actually. What do you want to do?
Okay, see, I have a customer, they want to have a quiz, but they do not want to track how many % I got as a employee. That's what the Betriebsrat is asking for, the Workers' Council is asking for. So I cannot see if someone passed with 70% or with 100%. Yeah. But I want to have it in my book that they have to reach at least 70% in order to complete the book.
Here, send success status based on score. Yeah, that means your success is your threshold that you defined in the quiz, and then the result type doesn't matter, but your score precision, and that would be the hack, you would set to 0.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a nasty one. You need to test that, which brings me to the next chapter. You're my favorite testing environment, but I would bet this works.
Okay. It's worth a try, definitely.
Yep. Okay, but yeah, Karim again. Sorry, with the nasty questions. Okay, before we just lose too much time, this is where we were. There is a lot of different settings in there. The most important is understanding of the result and the progress and vice versa. What is what? Yeah, that's the major part. The rest is basically coming from the specification of the LMS. Yeah, when should that success status be sent? How should it be sent? How should it be sent is result type and score precision. That's the example that I mentioned earlier. Yeah, some learning management systems expect the result being sent as a 3-digit integer. Some want it to be as a percentage, like .99 for 99% or .15 for 15%. And that's exactly what you do here. The bookmark store is again in 90% left on automatic. Let me show you what that does. That's the data model of SCORM, the CMI data. And in there, you can decide in which field CMI suspend underscore data or CMI.location, the bookmark, which is the ID of the last visited page when you leave the course, is written to. So sometimes the LMS administrator says, but we can only digest suspend data because our LMS doesn't support the location property. Then you know, okay, set this from automatic to suspend data. Yeah? That's the only story here. Yeah, usually you don't touch this because automatic makes the most sense. And if something goes wrong with the last visited functionality, this is where to look for. Another LMS specific one besides percentage and precision or result type and the percentage is the commit behavior. Default wise, if this is off, any change to the complete CMI dataset, like progress measure, last visited bookmark, all the stuff that is created in runtime is committed, which means sent to the LMS once something changes, each time again and again and again, just to make sure that we only get the right data. If this is in default, which is switched to true, the commitment to the learning management system, the send of the last stack of data happens as soon as you leave the SCO. That means if you press the close button. That's a question of what can the LMS digest? Some terminate the session if it was committed. Some older ones do it like this. And on the other hand, it's then a question of how you tailor your courses. Mostly you don't have to touch that. Please leave the hands-off save mode. Don't use it. That's just for debugging, so only use it when you are asked for from support. Restarting in SCORM, that means if you have end pages in place that potentially would offer a restart functionality, would that restart functionality be actually existing when this is consumed via SCORM or not? In some cases you want that. Our scenario, optional simulations, you can watch them as often as you want, so you would allow that. If you switch it off, you would say, watch it once and then answer the questions in a drill and practice course where you want to go sequentially through it very strictly. In that case, you need to switch that off. That's all the details. If you struggle anywhere, yeah, let's have a heads up. Honestly, yeah, this is something that needs experience. I'm fine with spending half an hour for each issue, and sooner or later you will be fine. This one is it. This one makes trouble. Newly closed playback window on mode exit. Default is false. And that means that we foresee the LMS system to take care of the window handling completely independent. And the default is false. That means close playback window on mode exit is false. That means the window that the content is hosted in is not actively closed by our JavaScript framework as soon as you exit the course, which will not terminate the API instance, which could lead to a total failure of tracking. And this is why you should always try to switch that on. Generally, yeah, on the top level, and then switch it off for that occasions where it's not necessary. For up-to-date learning management systems, especially for SuccessFactors Learning, having this active is absolutely mandatory because SuccessFactors switched off the window handling on their end. Yeah, so this is two options that you always have. Who is responsible of initializing windows? And that component should then be responsible of closing them again. And in that case, you would say, okay, we are opening our window, but the LMS should close it for us. And that's an issue. So this one really leads to trouble, so switch that on in general. Besides that, yep, that's basically it. And there's a lot of flavors and a lot of possibilities, but in most of the cases, your only modification in the first run necessary if you look for single SEO courses and use the master tracker capabilities, the only change that you do here right now is switching that on. So, however, courses, and we have our examples here. Yeah? A lot of this stuff with a lot of manifests to look and to change. So basically, what is our challenge as consultants? We come on place. There is this learning management system created by whatever niche vendor from Iceland, and then the customer is saying, hey, sorry, this doesn't work. So how to debug? So first of all, what I'm usually doing is I'm taking the course that should work and try it in an ultra clean environment where I know that I get all the data I need to, first of all, check whether the course has an issue or not. And this is where I can only recommend the famous SCORM Cloud. SCORM Cloud is from Rooster Software, and the Rooster guys, absolutely cool folks. I know their CIO. He's a brilliant guy. They are in the learning theory business. Right? It's a software company, and they are actually selling SCORM support and SCORM functionality. SCORM. This is their LMS, the SCORM Cloud, for mainly used for testing purposes, but also could be used as a real LMS. And SCORM bridges and SCORM frameworks to playback whatever. So they are really in the business, and this is most likely that's the top expertise in the market in regards of SCORM. And the SCORM Cloud is their product. It's not for free, but it's value for money. Yeah? So it's a definite recommendation. The small subscription here is $75 per year. for up to 10 users, and that's worth the money, for sure it is. And that one is a LMS sandbox where you can modify everything. So let's give it a try. I add content here, I import a SCORM package, that's what we do. And this SCORM package should live where? So I browse my folder, and I'm going to a simple one first. So let's use the course A, level 1, L1 is single SCO in SCORM 1.2. This is the one that I'm trying now. And import that course. This course is now being uploaded to the LMS. Another reason why you should start always debugging and trying with lean, slim things. Yeah? Otherwise, this already takes ages. And now it's finalizing. And then finally, we got the course sandbox where you can reset all the data that was previously gathered, and you can modify global variables of it, you can update it, and then downwards. And then I realized that this is all German. I'm sorry. I created the packages in German, and this is why this is German. So you have a look at this on your own, this section on your own in when creating English courses in English. This is basically the most comprehensive and detailed SCORM meta modification capabilities ever seen. Yeah, so some LMSs support this, some LMSs support that. In SCORM Cloud, you can do everything. Yeah, so you can really create something that absolutely fits to this target LMS completely if you are in trouble. And any property, any expected behavior, any strange behavior can be simulated in here. So this is something that you really have to have a closer look to and play with it a bit. Yeah, you have to spend some hours to really get through this. The documentation is also quite good. However, this course now is completion unknown, success unknown, score unknown, total time 0, never been touched, right? So let's launch it for the first time and see what's actually happening. This is my window. If this would have been full screen, I would already have had an issue, but this is my page 1. The page 1 is one of 2 pages in my course. So right now I'm expecting this to be 50% progress. Now I reached the end, so I expect this to be the 100% progress. And now I'm closing my window. And now it's coming back. And here we go, completion complete because of 100% reached in a total time of 7 seconds. And there is no success. Why? Because there was no test in it. So there is an unknown success status, absolutely. And secondary, no success, no score, no arms, no cookies. Yeah, so no score. So in an unassessed course, no quiz, no learning effort validation in terms of questions or something. And this is the expected data set that was written back to the LMS, completion complete, because I saw all 2 pages, and the total time measured between LMS initialized and LMS terminate. Let's have a look at another one. I uploaded the more complex one already. So learning course 1 as a single score course, but in SCORM 2004 and including the debug mode. What is debug mode? First of all, going back to producer to show you. And debug mode gives you, so first of all, where it is in any of the settings per mode or globally. Here in tracking general, debug mode can be switched on. What does debug mode do? Debug mode creates a pop-up of the course as soon as it is launched, and it traces out the complete communication between the learning management system and the content in a separate window in real time. It's the perfect debugging functionality to have our perspective, the perspective of the content, And usually you have the same possibility on LMS's end. Have a debug mode there, and then you can put both on the same screen and watch them and see whether there are some dialectual problems when both communicating to each other. But activating this one will create a course-specific debug window, which is coming from our content. So it's a feature of the Enable Now trainer. Exclamation mark, alert. Don't forget to switch that off as soon as you create the final package for the LMS. Well, otherwise, the learners will have the debug window. Yeah, so this happens, that you forgot that. This is the reason why I created my examples like this. In all different variations, and always having debug on or off in here to see the differences. Yeah, but this is where you set it. On the level of the tracking, you set the debug mode to active. And that's the reason why I was several times mentioning that I'm a fan of having different configurations, just to refresh your memory, because we talked configurations in both in the customization session and in the publication session, because it's handy for everything. But basically, just to refresh, adaptable resources, usually you got the playback settings, which is the defaults, and there is one node of playback settings per default after you created your work area initially. But no one says that's the only one. You can duplicate it n times. This is how those two were created, right? So the playback settings, SCORM debug, they have one difference in comparison with the factory default one. Let's see which one. Most likely it's just the fact that here I have the debug mode active, yeah, and that is set to SCORM automatic. That answers the other question that we had before, yeah, how to separate and avoid tracking cooking, and I want to track here like this and there like that. That's the way. Use different configurations. So I have that playback setting for SCORM debug, but it's not yet used. So we have to go down to configurations. And the default configuration is the only one. Same thing here, can be duplicated as often as you like. So I created one called SCORM debug. And the only difference here, a configuration again, is binding different settings resources together to one configuration. This one, default, is using the, guess what, default instances of all the settings. And this one has exactly one difference. It uses the playback settings where I switched the debug on. Okay? And now, and that's the final step, if we go down to one of our SCORM examples and publish it, in here, usually what you see is this. Yeah, you could also just select the other settings here. Yeah, but if there are more than one, yeah, it's easier to use the so-called work area configurations and then say, no, this should not be exported with the default configuration, plus this should be exported with the SCORM debug configuration because it's a debug package. Yeah, and then this is the cleanest way from my perspective to use those configurations. And now you just saw the way down. Yeah? Node, duplication, duplicated setting becomes part of a configuration, and within the export, you select that configuration as the configuration to use, and that's how things become debug capable without affecting the normal standard behavior. No? And you don't have to switch things on and off each time you want to use them or something. Yeah, this is how I would leave behind the configuration for the customer, and document it accordingly. Okay, but this was already uploaded. So let's see. Where is my browser? There we go, my course library, the course 1S 2004, which comes with more features. So let's have a look here. Going in, my last trial already was completion complete. Yeah, I saw all the pages, but I didn't succeed because my score in my assessment was only 50%, and the whole story took me 1 minute. So let's see. First of all, it's debug, right? So there is the debugger functions for the learning management system. That's the debugging functionality for the LMS. That's the side of the learning management system. And since this course was created as a debug course with my debug configuration, the courseware debugger is active as well. So let's see what we get. This looks now like a bit very techy. That's the course. The course is initializing the tracking debugger. This is ours. And somewhere there should also be the debugger from the LMS. Where is that guy? Or maybe I configured it wrong. Yeah, but let's come back to this later. I was expecting another window. Yeah, but it actually tells the same story than that one. So having this here and then moving our content and ditching it to the edge comes here. And this is a perfect debugging situation. You proceed, next page. We know that in our example, we got 5 pages. So what I expect if I'm watching page 2 out of this single SEO course is that my my progress measure would be 40%, right? So this is the current status, and that's the flow. Right? So that's the sequence of things that happen in communication between learning management system, and that's the current status of our SEOs that are currently active. And there we got the book with that ID, and there we have a progress of 1 with 2 of 2 pages visited. So this is most likely the chapter. The progress overall in the original SEO, the overall book, we have 25%, which is the expected value. Next one, 38%. Next one. Next one, my assessment to start, 75%. Now let's start the quiz. The quiz opens in the same window because I switched off full screen, otherwise it would fail. Now I'm doing everything right. True is true. So true, 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 and true. And done. Result page coming from the learning management system. The progress moved to 1 because my test was still part of the course. So the tracking is now set to 1. Course was passed through. So progress is 1, and passed became true because the threshold of my test was 80%. My result was 100. So I passed it. Green tick mark. Going out here, going out here. And that's a current bug. I don't know whether on our end or in SCORM Cloud's end, but this gets stuck at that page. I don't know why. So I'm always have to reload the SCORM Cloud main page to see. Going back to our course and see the latest results. Now complete, passed 100%, 4 minutes while I was talking a lot. This is I don't know any better. Yeah? The absolute perfect testing environment from my perspective. There are others. Yeah? So if you don't want to spend the 75 per year to and there is a lot more possible. Yeah? Even small peer group tests with learners in the medium size, you have 1,000 learners accessible already. You could do you have XAPI, more fancy possibilities of sequencing, activate third party. So it's ultra powerful. But there are others. So let's get back to the deck. This summarizes it again. And this is also for the workshop, but maybe let's do it once together. Yeah, that's the how-to that we just went through, but back in theory. This is my master. This is the SEO. Also we export as a single. That's what the debugger showed us in the on the head. Everything that is made out of is what we expect to be the progress. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different objects is my 100% progress. So each of the pages we expect to be 20% of it. This progress is forwarded to the master tracker. And so the master tracker takes this data, but this is the actual objects, So it's 20 per page if we see 5 pages as the threshold. The quiz is the result. This is where the result comes from. The result of the quiz is also forwarded to the SEO, and it's 4 questions, all are weighted equal. So each question answered right would be 25% of my score, of my result. And the simulation is totally ignored because it's not taken into consideration at all. Yeah? And that's a good example. Those together with the example package and with the SCORM cloud, I would expect of being the perfect equipment for a SCORM workshop with a customer. That's all you need. And key objective for workshops like that is try to stay as simple as possible as long as you can. Don't create data just because you can. Create data if it's necessary. And if it's not, use it in that way. Ultra simple, just go to the top. If we would, before we leave it, if we would use it more deeply, this is 3rd edition as well. Yeah, this is what you could end up in. So now I created a multi-SEO course, same as that one. And this is what some LMSs would then do. They would give you sitemaps here. They would give you specific navigation functionalities that are not part of the course, but they are part of the LMS as such. Yeah, so exporting multi-SEO course sometimes trigger very strange behaviors on the LMS side, which are meant to be features. Yeah? But from our perspective, since we know that we could actually use the highest aggregation level and use enable now functionality to do everything, it behaves a bit strange from our perspective. So this is what would happen. You would have tracking per SEO, you could have a sitemap and stuff. And usually, sure, there are scenarios like this. Yeah? If you want to export, let's say, 50 different simulations as a more or less that library approach that we usually using our libraries for. But nothing should be tracked at all, but all should be structured and being well formed. For sure, you could use a multi-SEO course for that purpose. But in most of the cases, you are better off when going for the simpler variation, which is the single SEO course. Goody. All right.
Mike, a question to this one, please. What do I do if I have this structure, although I have only exported a single SEO? Can I get rid of it in any way? This happens with quizzes, for example. So I have 3 levels. I just exporting a quiz as a SCORM, yes. And I get in my learning management system 3 levels. One for the organization, one for the title of the project, and one for the title of the mode, the test mode that I'm starting.
Yeah.
Is there a way to get rid of that in the SCORM manifest, or?
You can modify the manifest, but uploading the manifest would implicitly say that the course is totally updated. And if you don't keep your structures persistent, this could lead to a crash. So I would rather upload it from scratch. But yes, you can. I
meant editing it in the SCORM file before uploading it.
Yeah, sure.
Or is there another way to do it?
Wait a second. Yeah, this is where we come to in, let's say, 5 minutes. This is that guy here. Yeah, or our little friend reload. So summary for debugging. Yeah, if you want to use one of our own ones, the SuccessFactors trial instance or the customer LMS, my recommendation is use the smallest thinkable packages to start general structures. Discuss based on that. Otherwise, you simply lose time when uploading, when deploying, starting, clicking through 5 times. Yeah, you just get mad. Use debug mode. Don't forget to switch it off again to really understand what is posted to the LMS based on what object that happens and what's the result. Yeah, switch it off again before uploading it, and maybe consider a debug configuration, just as I did. I personally consider this as handy, but that's probably a question of taste. The perfect simulator from my perspective is the Rustici Storm Cloud. Yeah? Again, it's not free, but small edition is $75 per year. That's well spent, really well spent. It's the perfect test LMS. Other tools that could be used to validate SCORM. One is coming from ADL, the owners of SCORM, ADL test suites. Before the SCORM cloud was up and running, that was actually our only option to properly test within here in ADL, in the resources. That's the good read regarding SCORM and CMI5, the new packaging standard. So if you need anything, you start here. Again, this is somehow academic. So they are explaining everything, but it's a very academic approach. However, in the SCORM resources, you have all the you have all the additions, and in here there is the SCORM conformance test suite in version 1.7 for 1.2, and you got the same in different versions for the other SCORM standards. And this does the same as the tracer, the debugger of the SCORM cloud, but locally. Yeah, that's the advantage. No network needed. You can do that locally. That's a local component to download. And last but not least, and this is what you were asking for, Karim, is the reload editor. The reload editor, that's a project from the University of Boston, Bolton, not Boston, Bolton, and some others, where they created SCORM-related tools, and that was invented at the moment in time where ADL invented SCORM 2004, because usually you had SCORM 1.2 content, and you wanted, since sequencing was possible at that moment in time, you wanted to add sequencing, like target group specific ways through the content, for instance. That was our example before. Into existing courses, and that's what the reload editor was for. The reload editor is the perfect manifest modification tool. It loads manifest files, brings them into connection with the physical files, checks, validates, does everything, and you can add sequencing on top of things that are not existing yet. So if you have that challenge that customer says, we want this to be sequenced for beginners, intermediate, and professionals, this and that way, can Enable Now do that? And the official answer would be Enable Now as such not. We would have to import 3 different courses, but since you now know that the reload editor is actually existing, you could load your one manifest into the reload editor, keep the content untouched, add your 3 ways through the content using this third-party tool, saving your manifest file and then uploading it to the learning management system, and that would add sequencing to our little world. I have an issue. I would have loved to show you that guy because it's really a cool tool, but I don't get it running. I don't know why. Our IT removed our regular Java from our machines and replaced it with the SAP machine last week. Most likely it's related to SAP machine, to the SAP Java. It's not working. I don't know why. As soon as I got it working, I will create you some screenshots and some explanations and upload them to the consulting jam, because that's quite a handy one to know about. Yeah. So besides that, as always, final slide, some collections, or a collection of some information sources to be known: ADL, Rooster, Reload, the Wikipedia SCORM article, that is the minimum must read, at least. And then some SAP notes that I found valuable, and one is the SuccessFactors FAQ, which was rewritten by Thomas Pöhler last week, and some debugging how-tos also linked here. We don't have to go through this together. I believe this can be read independent. And now lines are open.
In the note that Thomas Pöhler just rewrote, it says that for content with simulations, like books with simulations, he would recommend SCORM 2004. And if there's just book pages, he would recommend SCORM 1.2. Could you use 1.2 in both cases?
Yes.
Anyhow? Yeah.
Yes. The recommendation is a result of the fact that you could define the legacy links like the simulations as so-called objectives. And then the objective is something which is only existing in SCORM 2004. And that's only necessary if you have hyperlinked contents where you want to make sure that all the links that are provided are once used. And that's the objective. And that's what SCORM 2004 can do. That means I just want to make sure that they clicked all the simulations. I don't care whether they went through them, but I just want to make sure that they clicked them and opened them once. Yeah? If you have a scenario like this, which I personally never had, because that makes not that much sense to me, but if you wanted that, you would have to track the objectives, and this is only possible in 2004, not in 1.2. I believe that this is where the recommendation comes from.
Is that the track objective data?
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Then everything which is, as in my example, is linked, but either outside or hidden, would become an objective. So you have to use it once, but you don't care what happens there. At least you went there once.
Both. Okay.
But I don't see a logical scenario where this could make sense. Really not.
Other question, just for confirmation.
Yes.
We can set the result for test to be 80% or 70%, and then I just need to answer 7 out of 10, and my result is passed. We don't have that for the progress. We can't say you only need to see 70%, 7 out of 10.
Sure, we have. You would have the SEOs. You would have the master tracker, and then you would put the stuff that you consider as not mandatory into the hidden part.
But you cannot say completely random 7 out of the 10. No, okay.
No.
Okay.
I would not, but I would not. This is the same thing. I wouldn't see any scenario where this would make sense. Yeah, pick 70 random 70% out of this curriculum randomly, and then you passed it. What's that? Does that make sense? No.
Okay. But that would be the book. You put that in a separate book where you say no tracking, and then okay. Yep.
No, a separate book, no tracking, or just separate book and outside, which means behind the hidden folder. That works in the same way. That would already be sufficient to say on the last page I have, and now click that button to go to the optional chapter, and the complete chapter lives here underneath that one. So it would not be projects, it would be optional stuff. And if that chapter would live here, it wouldn't be tracked.
And you don't need to hide the book pages. I just need to hide the book.
No, you put the, if this would be optional, you would put the complete thing here, and then it would be gone. If it's outside of the visible structure, it won't be an SEO and it won't be tracked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And additionally, for sure, you can then add to really be on the 100% safe side. If you switch that additionally off, you're good. For sure. Yeah.
If I may, Mike, then I would take the next question.
Yes.
Is there a place where we can modify the SCORM manifest template? Like I have seen learning management systems that require certain additions to the SCORM manifest in order to work properly. And if I don't want to do that manually each time I create a course, is there any way to put that?
I have no idea where this is coming from, most likely from the core. And I never had that question yet.
Okay.
I can't answer. Let's have a look. I mean, where would you put it to? I would put it into the trainer resource. So let's have a look there. There is the AICC control. No manifest template. No idea.
Yeah,
Really
I think I would search for it in the publishing routines.
No.
Okay.
That's a ticket. That might be possible, but most likely the template comes from the core somewhere.
Okay. Other quick question: when we spoke about different configurations, on the manager, it's always the default configuration, no matter how many I create. I cannot set the manager to use a different configuration, can I?
Only via link. The manager for sure. If you say you want to use a configuration from now on as the standard for everybody, that's the bold one. That's the bold one.
Yeah, which works for the producer. But my impression, I'm not 100% sure, is that this information does not get passed to the manager.
The node and all its siblings, so all the configuration nodes it uses plus the configuration as such need to be published. And maybe you forgot one on the way.
And because also the same thing happens for me for dictionaries. I cannot set the playback dictionary to be a different one than the standard one.
That's a known bug and that's fixed.
Okay.
But for now, this should work. If this is not working in the way, and you can be sure that you published everything that belongs to it, and after setting it default, it would not be used by manager as a bug.
Okay.
Then we have to open a ticket. And the workaround is, and that works anyway, you have style equals and then the technical ID of the configuration. That works for whatever scenario.
Yes, that one's known. The idea is to, if I set something else as a default for the authors, I always also want them to automatically switch to that without telling them each time. But that does not seem to. I'll double check it.
Double check it, and otherwise you have to open a ticket. Yeah.
Okay. And for my initial question about the quiz, where I have three levels of you know, in the learning management system that users have to expand in order to start the quiz, there is no way around it on a setting level.
No.
No. Okay. Last question. Some content providers, like other authoring tools.
Are there other authoring tools? No.
Yeah, no. Our favorite customer has the situation that their old courses with the old tool, when they load them into the learning management system, would start up automatically as soon as the user goes to that node.
Yes.
Ours don't. Is there a way to kind of auto start the courses? I know it's very unspecific question. I hate it to ask unspecific questions, but maybe it triggers something with you.
Yeah. Where was that? What was that SCORM actually? No. Where was this start book? Ah, no. Here. Sorry, man. There, and there. Start open book directly. This one.
Okay. Okay, I thought that was only for our library. All right.
I believe this triggers just like, hey, I'm called and go. Try, but most likely yes.
All right. Okay. Thanks.
Goody. Anything else? Anybody? Are you enlightened?
Very much so.
Yeah,
it was really useful.
Thanks.
Although working with this crap for more than 10 years, I never had such a structured introduction to it.
Thanks for the flowers.
Thanks, Mike. It was really good. Cheers.
So, no more questions. In that case, I would say goodbye to you. Wish you a very nice and isolated weekend.
Same to you.
Stay healthy.
Stay healthy, folks. If there is anything, as always, let me know. This session was recorded. Recording will be in Learning Hub by mid of next week. If there is anything, let me know and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye, Mike. Bye, guys.
Bye.